Really, this house is lovely. The sunlight is just perfect. Yeah, I can't wait to live here. Next to the smiling in-laws, my husband, Eric, is also nodding in satisfaction. We came to view our potential new home, but I hadn't expected it to be such a luxury property. As my in-laws and Eric carry on making decisions, my anxiety grows. Are we really going to buy this place? Seeing my confusion, the agent, Ms. Johnson, whispers to me, "Could you please come into this room? There's something about the contract we need to discuss." Led to another room, I was internally frightened. I thought I was going to be pressured into signing the contract. However, what Ms. Johnson said was completely unexpected. "Run away now." What? I was taken aback by her unexpected words and didn't understand what she meant. "Run away? What do you mean?" "I'm sorry for startling you all of a sudden, but I've seen something." Ms. Johnson started speaking in an uneasy manner. What she revealed was shocking. "My name is Melissa. I'm turning 32 this year. Eric is the same age. We don't have children yet but have been discussing buying our own home. I've always dreamed of a condominium, but Eric prefers a single-family house. It's for Eric's parents. His mother, Patricia, is 65. His father, Paul, is 66. They're relatively young for seniors. However, both in-laws are physically challenged. During a family trip when Eric was in high school, they were involved in a car accident. Fortunately, Eric was only slightly injured, but his parents suffered serious injuries. Though their lives weren't in danger, Patricia injured her back, and Paul can't move one of his legs properly. As a result, both had to quit their jobs. After graduating high school, Eric has worked hard, supporting his parents through everything. We met through mutual friends when we were 26. My first impression of Eric was that he was a serious, family-oriented person. He always seemed overly concerned about his parents. But once I knew the circumstances, I began to understand, and started to see him as a kind person. Our relationship naturally progressed, and eventually, we got married. Given this background, Eric wishes to buy a house where we can comfortably live with his parents. Since Eric is an only child and considering his parents' physical conditions, it seems like a natural decision. Yet, I've always felt something off about his parents. And my intuition wasn't wrong. Looking back, I felt this discomfort during our first family meeting 3 years ago. Nervously going to his parents' house, Patricia welcomed us. "Welcome, Melissa. It's a small house, but make yourself comfortable." "Thank you. I will." Seeing Patricia slowly bending and walking struck me hard. Even though I knew from Eric she had difficulty walking, it was still a shock. Paul also appeared. "Nice to meet you, Melissa." "Nice to meet you." Walking with a limp to protect his leg. The aftermath of the accident still affected them, making work difficult. But Eric said they were managing with insurance money. Seeing the in-laws, I was relieved I had bought sushi for lunch beforehand. Feeling sorry for them having to host us with their conditions, I had prepared it. Offering the sushi immediately, Patricia exclaimed with joy, "Sorry for the trouble." "Thank you. Let's eat right away." No sooner had she spoken than the in-laws began eating the sushi non-stop. Their fervor left me astonished. "Mom, you two starting without us? We're hungry too." Eric raised his voice. "Sorry, dear. It's been a while since we had such luxurious sushi. We just couldn't resist. We have food for you and Melissa, too." What Patricia brought out to the table was, surprisingly, canned food meant for emergencies. "Sorry, this is all we have. she said with a smile, with Paul also laughing. Mom, thanks. Eric spoke cheerfully, but noticing my stunned silence, he turned to me. Melissa! What's with that face? As I was unsure what to say. Right, we didn't have any drinks. Eric began to stand up. Here, I've poured some for everyone. Then, Paul came walking unsteadily with a tray holding glasses for everyone. Thanks, Dad. Paul, I'm sorry. Let me set them out. I was speechless as I took the tray from Paul. The glasses were in poor condition, some cracked. It was filled with water. I had just seen Paul filling them at the sink. Thank you. I could only mutter my thanks in a hoarse voice. In the end, the sushi we brought was almost entirely eaten by the in-laws. We had brought it to share with everyone. The two of them, holding the sushi case. Delicious, delicious. Continued eating at an incredible pace, making it difficult for me to partake. Eric was eating the canned side dishes as if it were normal. Well, I wanted the sushi for Patricia and the others, so it's okay. But the canned food was unexpected. Looking at the can I had in hand, I noticed it was nearing its expiration date. I pretended not to see it and quietly ate the side dish inside. I could hardly taste it. Seeing me silent, Patricia asked with concern. Did the simplicity of the meal upset you? No, not at all. Be honest. I heard from Eric that your family are well-known landowners. You must be used to much more lavish meals than we can provide. I'm sorry we can only offer such meager fare. At first, I thought they were being spiteful, but it seemed they were serious. I was even more lost for words. That's not. As I was flustered, Patricia looked at me weakly. Sorry. As you might have heard from Eric, we have our physical limitations, right? We can't really go to the grocery store much. I'm sorry we can't entertain you properly. That's true. It's frustrating to think if only our bodies moved better. Paul nodded repeatedly. Faced with such remarks, I was left speechless. It's enough. Thank you. Indeed, as the in-laws said, they must have done their best to entertain us, considering their physical limitations. Living without working might have led to a simpler life, so maybe canned food and tap water can't be helped. However, having bought enough sushi for everyone, only for them to quickly eat it all themselves. It didn't sit well with me, but Eric was laughing, not seeming to find it strange, so I felt it wasn't my place to say anything. With unresolved feelings, we decided to leave the in-laws' house. Later, the topic of our wedding came up. I had been looking forward to it, but Eric came to me with a serious face to apologize. Sorry. My parents don't have any money, so they can't help with the wedding costs. That's okay. I was planning to use my savings anyway, so don't worry about it. I cheerfully replied. I had told my parents they didn't need to contribute either. I thought if only my parents contributed, it might make the in-laws feel guilty. So, we had a simple ceremony. After some time, Patricia called. Since they couldn't help with the wedding, they wanted to send us home appliances as a wedding gift as a gesture. I tried to refuse, saying they didn't need to bother, but Patricia insisted on sending them. A few days later, several large boxes arrived at our home. I was surprised. Patricia and the others bought us so much. Grateful, I started to unwrap the tape. Inside were assortments of old home appliances. An old vacuum cleaner that wasn't sold in stores anymore, a microwave with peeling paint, and other used items that had clearly been in use for decades. I even found the cracked cups and dishes I had seen at the family meeting. Could all this have been from Patricia's house? No way. I was at a loss for words. Mom and Dad sending this is really nice. Eric seemed happy, prompting me to protest. Wait, Eric. Aren't these the appliances Patricia used at home? They're all damaged and in poor condition. This is too much. What are you saying? They're still usable, right? You should be grateful. I was dumbfounded by Eric's pleased expression. But since we received them, I had no choice but to thank them. Reluctantly, I called Patricia. Thank you for the appliances. Have they already arrived? That was quick. Those were things we've used for a long time. They're filled with love, so we couldn't bear to throw them away. Maybe you could use them? You'll need appliances as newlyweds, right? Patricia's cheerful speech only increased my unease. That's true, but some of them are damaged or don't work at all. We appreciate the thought, but we'll buy new ones. What a waste. Buying new ones. You could save money, right? Save money? We would have liked to buy you new ones if we could. But, we have our physical limitations. It's hard for us to go to the store, so giving you things from our home was all we could do. If they didn't have the money, they didn't need to send anything. Moreover, Patricia mentioned this to Eric, and I ended up being scolded by him. Melissa, you complained about the appliances to Mom? They went out of their way to send us stuff from their home for us. Don't waste their kindness. I didn't mean to. It made me seem like the bad one. Reluctantly, I ended up using the damaged appliances. It's such a shame for newlyweds. I couldn't help but feel dissatisfied. However, I had to swallow my feelings, convincing myself they did what they could, given their financial situation. Then, Eric suggested we buy a home. Of course, I've always dreamed of owning our home. It should have been happy news. According to Eric, he wanted to buy a house that could accommodate living with his parents in the future. I was hesitant. Though I wanted to get along, the behavior of the in-laws to date left me feeling unsettled. I started wondering if living together was really a good idea. The sending of damaged appliances showed they disliked spending money. Initially, I thought they were trying to help in their way, but that started to seem dubious. Especially when I visited their house for some reason later and found all the appliances had been replaced with new ones. This raised questions in my mind. Weren't they supposed to be short on money? They had said they couldn't go to stores because of their mobility issues. But on reflection, these days, one can buy products online without needing to go to a store. It made me think they just wanted to get rid of their old, unwanted appliances under the guise of a wedding gift. I couldn't say this to Eric, though. Anyway, I was worried that living together would force us into a frugal lifestyle. Besides, knowing the in-laws and new construction seemed unlikely. I feared they would push for an old, damaged property just because it was cheap. Despite my worries, surprisingly, the in-laws were interested in a solid house. Or rather, they already had a rough idea of the property. It seems you've already made quite a bit of progress. Confused, Eric responded as if it were obvious. I took Mom and them to see some houses on my day off. There's this really nice new house they liked. You didn't tell me about this. I felt left out and upset. They were making decisions about our future home without me. Feeling unsatisfied, I decided to go see the property myself. Eric, the in-laws, and I visited the real estate company. Then the person in charge came right away. Soon, a young, cute woman approached us. Her business card read Johnson. Nice to meet you. My name is Johnson, and I'll be assisting you. Ms. Johnson greeted us politely. She took us out in her car to view the property. In the car, the in-laws were chatting amiably with Ms. Johnson. It appears the new construction is in a high-end area. I had a bad feeling about this. After a while, we arrived at the property. It was a detached house with a large garden, looking quite luxurious. Such a grand house must be expensive. We went inside and checked the layout in the living room. The in-laws were engrossed in a cheerful chat. Really, this house is lovely. The sunlight is just perfect. Yeah, I can't wait to live here. Feeling anxious as the conversation progressed, I couldn't help but interject. Excuse me. This is my first time here, but... Oh, right. My apologies. Here is the brochure. I was surprised when I saw the brochure for the property. The asking price was clearly over our budget. Surely, this house wasn't suitable for us. Yet, the in-laws and Eric acted as if this property was meant for them. Sweating nervously and confused, I caught Ms. Johnson's intense gaze. She seemed like she wanted to say something. While glancing at the brochure, I pondered what to do. Eventually, the in-laws wandered off towards the terrace. Eric moved to assist them. They seemed absorbed in their conversation. Then, Ms. Johnson looked at me with determination and whispered, "Could you please come to this room? There's something about the contract we need to discuss." Surprised by Ms. Johnson's serious expression, I nodded instinctively. Led to another room, I was internally frightened. Was I going to be pressured to sign something immediately? However, what Ms. Johnson said next was entirely unexpected. "Run away now!" What? Taken aback by her unexpected words, I didn't understand what she meant. Run away? What do you mean? I'm sorry for startling you suddenly, but I've seen something. Ms. Johnson began speaking in an unsettled manner. Eric and the in-laws had been visiting this property before. According to Ms. Johnson, during those visits, the in-laws were walking without canes or assistance. What? What do you mean? But my in-laws are supposed to be physically limited. I couldn't believe it. The in-laws I had always seen struggled to walk. They were supposedly unable to work or go to the grocery store because of it. Could it be? I managed to mutter something. Do you want to see for yourself? Peeking through a slight opening Ms. Johnson made in the door, I surreptitiously watched the three of them. Indeed, the in-laws were walking. Of course, without any canes or assistance. Why? Could they walk normally all this time, pretending to be physically impaired? For what purpose? It might be a good idea to take a video as evidence. Ms. Johnson's calm voice echoed in my head. Evidence? What kind of evidence? I'll explain later. As directed by Ms. Johnson, I pulled out my cell phone in a daze and recorded a video of the in-laws. I was utterly stunned. I had no idea what was happening. Ms. Johnson explained that at first she suggested a barrier-free home because the in-laws seemed to have bad legs. This property is equipped with a ramp, which might make moving around easier. However, Patricia laughed it off. We don't need anything like that. Saying this, Patricia and the others walked away. Ms. Johnson didn't understand why they pretended to have bad legs. The mystery was soon solved. When handing over the mortgage documents to the eager-to-buy in-laws, it seemed the contract was progressing under my name. Here are the documents you filled out. Looking at the documents she handed over, my name was indeed written on them. Eavesdropping on their conversation, Ms. Johnson heard a horrifying discussion. Having Melissa pay for the loan is best. We've received quite a bit from the insurance company by pretending my back and Paul's leg were bad, but we've spent a lot on new appliances recently. Mom, that's too direct. But that's what we've been saying for years, right? Find someone wealthy. Patricia said this matter-of-factly, with Paul seemingly agreeing. Eric kept his promise. Melissa completely trusts us. Rich people who don't suspect others are easy to manipulate. Realizing the truth left me dumbfounded. The in-laws pretended to have mobility issues to defraud the insurance. And Eric was aware of it. Hearing about the exchange from Ms. Johnson left me speechless. They expected me to pay for the mortgage? Unbelievable. Indeed, my family owns some land, and I had mentioned to Eric early on that we were landowners. But our lifestyle is very modest. I've always been taught by my parents not to waste money, and I don't own any luxury items. I'm just an ordinary office worker with no high salary. I never imagined Eric approached me with the motive of targeting the fact that I'm a landowner for money. I was so shocked I couldn't say anything, to which Ms. Johnson apologized. I'm sorry for bringing this up so suddenly. No, please don't worry, Ms. Johnson. I'm actually glad you told me. I managed to say, forcing the words out, and Ms. Johnson's face fell. There's more to the story. Then, Ms. Johnson revealed something shocking. Eric had said, "We'll need Melissa's cooperation going forward." Said. And Patricia had suggested, "Yes, next time, give Melissa a little push. Say she fell and claim treatment costs indefinitely. Teach her that, and she'll be delighted to join us, getting money just for a bit of pain." She said this with a malicious smile. I felt terrified. They were planning to involve me in fraud. What is that? A little push means they're fully intent on injuring me. And they want me involved in their deceit? Impossible. I know this is a difficult conversation. Maybe it was unnecessary, but I felt I had to tell you. This is a serious crime, and I feared for your safety. Ms. Johnson spoke hesitantly, her words echoing deep within me. It was hard to believe, and I didn't want to. But I had seen it with my own eyes. The in-laws walking normally. My name on the mortgage documents. And Eric, who had been deceiving me. Dizzy with the magnitude of what had happened, I stumbled. Are you all right? Ms. Johnson caught me as I nearly fell. Right, I need to be strong. The person in charge had courageously informed me. I needed to take action. Thank you. I'm okay. It's a shock, but I don't want to be involved in fraud, and now that I know the truth, I can't let the in-laws continue like this. I said firmly. Ms. Johnson nodded with conviction, understanding my resolve. There was no time to waste. Ms. Johnson and I quickly discussed what to do next. Then, I rushed out through another door. The in-laws were kept busy by Ms. Johnson. I texted Eric that I was feeling unwell and would go home first. Taking this opportunity, I decided to gather evidence at home. I remembered seeing some records about the in-laws' accident. Using the internet, I searched for the date and details of the accident, relying on my memory to find the insurance company and doctors' names. Once prepared, I immediately reported to the insurance company. When I mentioned it was a case of fraudulent claims, they directed me to a specialized department where I shared the details. Of course, I also sent the video I took today via text. Subsequently, the insurance company filed criminal charges, and the in-laws were arrested. I later found out that while the accident and injuries were real, they weren't severe. Despite this, they continued to pretend their conditions were serious to swindle money. And they had been defrauding money. However, with traffic accidents, insurance companies are usually on high alert for false claims. I wondered how they managed to deceive the investigations, but the mystery was solved. They had conspired with a relative who was a doctor to forge medical certificates. Despite only having minor injuries, they pretended they were severe. Such an unbelievable story. Of course, the doctor was arrested too. This doctor, who had engaged in similar frauds apart from my in-laws, was already marked by the insurance company. That's why they were able to arrest him so quickly. In the end, they were just a greedy family. Not just stingy, but outright criminals. Eric, who had turned a blind eye, was no different. I told everything and expressed my desire for a divorce. However, Eric wouldn't accept it and resisted. "Meet with Mom at least. It's all a misunderstanding," Eric said. I couldn't understand what was misunderstood. I didn't want to see them, but I had things I wanted to say too. Eric and I went to the prison where the in-laws were. Due to the severity of their crimes, they didn't get probation. Upon entering the visitation room, Patricia looked completely defeated. Through the acrylic panel, I glared at Patricia. "Patricia, I heard you've been committing fraud and even planned to involve me? Why did you do such things?" Patricia spoke in a feeble voice. "Such things. The accident was real, and we did have leg problems. But once we got better, if we could still get paid as medical expenses, why not take it?" Was she unaware that she committed a crime? Astonished, I spoke clearly. "What are you saying? That's a crime. And to think you planned to involve me in your deceit, you're insane." Then Eric intervened. "That's how easy money comes, Melissa. We just messed up this time. You must understand, living off your family's money." Eric's flippant attitude made my anger explode. "Don't lump me in with you. My parents and I work hard. I would never earn money by committing crimes. You're the lowest of the low. I want nothing to do with you ever again." After my outburst, Eric and Patricia were stunned by my stern attitude. Patricia and Eric were more terrible than I had imagined. Having finally shown their true colors, they only thought about living easily and extracting money from others. Even after arrest, they hadn't woken up to their actions. Realizing the conversation was futile, I left Eric at the prison. I wouldn't come back here again. Later, I filed for divorce. It took time, but the divorce was finalized. Eric, notorious in his company for his parents' arrest, resigned due to the discomfort. His whereabouts afterward are unknown. Presumably, he lives modestly with the released in-laws. Never had I imagined such despicable people existed. I had enough of marriage for a while. Deciding to focus on my career, I found a new job. Then, unexpectedly, I met someone. I met a kind man, Scott, who accepted everything about me. Scott understood and healed me when I was hurt and had gone through tough times. However, I was hesitant about moving to the next stage. I trusted him because he was a really good person, but I had become cautious due to the lessons from my previous marriage. To dispel my anxieties, Scott introduced me to his parents. They welcomed me and entertained me with a proper meal. I was moved by such a normal act. His parents were also of a gentle nature and very open-hearted, just like Scott. With this family, I felt safe. Thinking so, I married Scott. Finally, I was able to have the peaceful life I had always wanted. As time went by, the conversation about buying a house with Scott came up. I mentioned that there was a real estate agency I wanted to go to and took Scott there. It was Ms. Johnson's real estate agency. Thanks to Ms. Johnson, who handled our case, we were able to realize we had been deceived. I couldn't be more grateful for that. Upon entering the real estate agency, a familiar face caught my eye. "Welcome." Ms. Johnson seemed to have recognized me. I greeted her with a smile. Hello. It's been a while. It seems Ms. Johnson is doing well. The new business card she gave me had Chief written on it. Seeing that she had grown and accumulated experience made me feel happy. Ms. Johnson, taking a moment when Scott was away, smiled and said, "It's great that you found a good person." Smiled and said, "Thanks to you telling me the truth that time, Ms. Johnson." "Thank you." I smiled back, influenced by her warmth. Thinking of what I could do for Ms. Johnson as a token of gratitude, I decided, let's buy a house here. This time, it will surely be a wonderful home. Thinking of my new home made me naturally smile. Life sure is tough ahead. Who would have thought? Paralysis from the waist down, all because you didn't listen to your in-laws. From the landline speaker, the energetic voice of Bethany, my MIL, could be heard. One afternoon at the family home. Mom, Terza, holding the receiver, looked confused, glancing at me with a puzzled expression, as if she didn't understand what was being said. Apparently, someone had an accident, and for some reason, this seemed to be a cause for celebration. With a baffled look, my mother asked Bethany, what do you mean by tough?" Bethany, on the other end of the phone, laughed heartily as we exchanged confused looks. Having lost Dottie, my FIL, early on, Bethany had expressed a desire to live with me and Neely because "I've been living alone for so long, it's lonely," she said. Initially, she said she didn't need rent or help with household chores, but within 2 months. That was just adult politeness. It's only natural to pay a token of gratitude. She had changed her tune, leading to repeated arguments between us, Neely and her. In the end, unable to mend our relationship and at Neely's suggestion, I was in the process of moving out of the in-laws' place, going back and forth to my parents' house to move my things. Bethany, with her nasty nature, made my life difficult daily. Just like when she hurled unpleasant words at me, she bluntly told my mom, "That's why, son's wife. Your stupid daughter failed to brake and caused a major accident. It's utterly ridiculous." Shocked, I spontaneously spoke up towards the speaker. "Son's wife, you mean me? I'm fine, though." "What accident are you talking about?" "My name is Kaylin. I'm 35 years old and currently work as a salesperson for luxury accessories at a department store. Having graduated from college, I've been employed at an accessory shop for nearly 15 years. Though I'm considered a veteran in the workforce, responding to new trends and customer demands is both fun and fulfilling, and I work energetically every day. The age range at work is broad, but as the sales are primarily women's accessories, the staff is predominantly female. Among them, I'm one of the few singles. Though I desired marriage and engaged in matchmaking activities, including friend introductions, I hadn't found a suitable match by the age of 35. Thus, I decided to take a step forward and opened the door to a marriage consultation office. I earnestly listened to the counselor, detailed my values and lifestyle. And, after considering whether we matched, I met Neely, an engineer. He was a year older, pleasant to talk to, and the way he shyly listened to my stories left a very good impression. As we continued to date and learn more about each other, I couldn't help but let my salesperson spiel slip out now and then. But as I talked with him, any stiffness I felt gradually melted away. After meeting a few times, Neely would often talk about his favorite novels, and I found myself nodding along, a stark contrast to our initial interactions where I was the one doing most of the talking. Eventually, we both agreed that we would not find a better match than each other. And based on our deep trust, we decided to get married. We were looking for a new home near Neely's childhood home. Dottie had passed away early but left behind a substantial inheritance, and Bethany, the mother-in-law, continued to live there alone. Neely had moved out after getting a job and rarely came back. It seemed Bethany had been feeling anxious for a long time, and one day, she expressed a desire to live with us. Being alone all this time makes the loneliness accumulate, and at my age, I have to worry about illness and injuries, don't I? Instead of looking for a new house, I don't need rent if you could live with me here. That way, we could spend more time together, and of course, I wouldn't interfere with a newlywed couple. Could you please consider easing my anxiety? When we visited to greet her, Bethany seemed gentle and modest. We'll keep our living areas separate, and since I'm not working, I'll take care of the housework and cleaning, she said. The loneliness of living alone was palpable, and Neely and I couldn't ignore Bethany. Moreover, we had been planning to start infertility treatments, hoping for a child in the future. The treatment would require a long-term commitment and significant medical expenses. We had planned to cut back on our living expenses, but living with the in-laws was supposed to provide not just savings, but also some financial leeway for these treatments. This made us considerably positive about the idea of living together. Honestly, I think it's a wish come true. It's better than living just the two of us in the neighborhood and then moving in together later. It saves us from changing our lifestyle multiple times and wasting money on moving, Neely said. I agree. I don't want Bethany to look so lonely. Living with the in-laws was tense due to the mother-in-law and daughter-in-law relationship, but it seemed like the best solution financially for us and mentally for Bethany. After much discussion, we decided to move in with the in-laws. Upon hearing our decision, Bethany said, "Thank you, truly. Being with family is the greatest happiness." And she cried tears of joy. We moved our belongings in, and our new life began smoothly. However, just a few months later, Bethany's attitude had completely changed. One day, she suddenly said to me with a stern face, "You're always coming home late. What's going on? You say it's work, but is it really? Retail work should end when the customers leave. It's strange that you don't come home until this late after the department store closes. Where exactly are you working?" Caught off guard by her sudden accusation, I was at a loss for words. Furthermore, "So, when are you quitting?" Bethany continued. "I am entrusted with a position of responsibility. My job involves more than just sales, such as attending meetings at the department store and other stores, so it's not unusual for me to work overtime, especially during busy periods." Naturally, Neely knew this and supported me without complaint, even when I came home later than him. I was taken aback by the suggestion that I should quit my job and stay at home, leaving me confused. After all, if you're married, you should devote yourself to the home. How long do you plan to work? In my time, such a thing was unthinkable. If I knew you were that kind of woman, I would have never allowed my son to marry you. Bethany, I value my work, and Neely and I have decided to support each other while living our lives. Continuing my job is a choice made by both me and Neely. I managed to argue back, trembling. However, Bethany became even more stern and scoffed at my words. A woman working only disrupts the home. Kaylin, you have a responsibility to look after the home while Neely is away. You need to understand that. My side of the story was not heard, and Bethany only insisted on me resigning. Gradually, Bethany's delusions escalated, suggesting, "You're not coming home because you have something to hide," which prompted me to hastily discuss the matter with Neely for mediation. Of course, I had nothing to hide. Neely was surprised by Bethany's sudden change but intervened and reprimanded her. Though she seemed dissatisfied, it seemed she had given up on me to some extent, settling for grumbling. However, the snide remarks towards me did not cease. Instead, she suddenly said, "Aren't you ever going to start paying rent?" "Huh? But in the beginning, you said rent wasn't necessary, that living here was enough. Even in close relationships, there's a need for courtesy. Aren't you ashamed to live here for free? Really, for a job you want to keep so badly, one would think you're earning a princely sum, but it turns out it's not much at all." Bethany started to go back on her initial conditions, attempting to break the promise. Despite having an inheritance, Neely and I cover most of the day-to-day expenses. It's hard to believe she has any financial grievances. Yet, she claimed, the conditions for living together were just out of consideration, putting us in a difficult position. Fed up with her disrespectful behavior, I firmly responded to Bethany. "We came here because you said rent wasn't necessary. But if that's not the case, then Neely and I are prepared to leave right away." Suddenly, Bethany's face turned red with anger. "Ungrateful! You don't even pay rent, let alone a token of gratitude," causing a commotion. It seemed she wanted to argue that, even if not rent, you should at least offer some token of gratitude for letting you live here. Instead of rent, we were asked to make payments as a token of gratitude, but financially, it made no difference. Furthermore, the amount Bethany suggested was significantly higher than the going rate for nearby apartments. After discussing it with Neely, we decided to give her a certain amount each month. She must want some pocket money. She's been living modestly on her own for a while. If a little indulgence can be covered with money, then it should be cheap," Neely said, sounding resigned as if he was also having a hard time dealing with Bethany. Although we didn't agree to the requested amount, we decided to give her a smaller sum as pocket money, which temporarily stopped Bethany's attacks. Although it was unsatisfying, just when we thought one problem was resolved, another incident occurred. Suddenly, Neely's sister, Cheryl, returned home. Cheryl, who had been married and living elsewhere, had divorced for some reason. One day, she arrived unexpectedly with a large trunk, declaring, "I'll be living here from today on. It might come as a surprise, but my husband was cheating on me. So, I slapped the divorce papers on him and left. Don't worry, I've been a housewife for a long time, so I won't be any trouble." Despite her words, "For dinner, let's go out for steak, it'll be a treat," Cheryl demanded. Bethany seemed pleased that Cheryl had returned, clearly siding with her. Cheryl's ex-husband was a wealthy executive, and Cheryl's flashy brand name belongings were noticeable. Imagining her future spending habits made me worried. We had only met a few times during engagement and wedding ceremonies. Being 4 years older, at 40, the slight age difference made our conversations awkward. Moreover, upon learning about my job, "You get an employee discount, right? Why don't you get me some stuff for free? We're family after all," she outrageously said. Both Neely and I were stunned. When I refused, she glared at me irritably and lost interest, saying, "Oh, really? Kaylin is so inconsiderate." "Well, considering your age, I guess Neely was desperate," Cheryl said nonchalantly, pushing me closer to my limit. Bethany would complain, "My back hurts. Don't overwork me," leaving all the housework to me. Despite being employed and Cheryl being unemployed, when I suggested sharing the workload, she resisted, saying, "I'm tired from the divorce drama. I didn't come back to be slaved around." The workload at home only increased. Although Neely tried to help, as an engineer working every day, he was often too exhausted when he got home. Eventually, my stress reached a breaking point. I started crying unexpectedly, had sleepless nights, and the thought of starting fertility treatments became impossible. My condition deteriorated to the point where I considered seeking counseling for some relief. Seeing my distressed state, "Let's move out immediately," Neely proposed. "It's absurd for you to endure this, and I can't let you suffer because of Bethany and the others indefinitely. I'm sorry for not prioritizing you over them. But the money for that. We can't be worrying about expenses now. Your health is what's most important." With that, Neely immediately began searching for a new place for us. However, it was precisely the season for graduations, new school and job starts. Meaning affordable properties were snapped up quickly, indicating our move from the in-laws might take some time. Meanwhile, Cheryl's attitude only continued to deteriorate without any sign of connection. I used somewhat expensive cosmetics and accessories for my role as a salesperson. Being unemployed, Cheryl had little money to spare. It seemed she envied my possessions, as I started noticing things going missing or being moved. When confronted, she admitted to it. "So what? I like this brand too. Borrowing a bit shouldn't be an issue, right? These are my personal items. Please don't use them without asking." Complaining about using a lipstick or borrowing a necklace for a day. "We're family, so don't get irritated." Despite my repeated warnings, she would bring Bethany into it, and they would both complain to me together. Bethany, with an exasperated sigh, would tell me, "You should be more accommodating." She blamed me for it. With the situation not improving, I resorted to securing my belongings in a lockable box, only for the lock to be forcefully broken. Standing before the ruined remnants of the small lock, my anger burst forth. "I've repeatedly warned you, and now the lock's been broken. If you can't even respect the basic courtesy of not touching others' belongings, then living together is simply impossible. I'm leaving." Declaring this to them, I started packing my belongings into a large bag hastily. Bethany, enraged, followed me, persisting in her anger. "Think it over. Can't you endure that much?" Realizing I was unmoved, she began making a call somewhere. That call was to my parents' house. Whether Terza answered the phone. "What kind of upbringing have you given Kaylin?" was heard as a complaint. What Terza replied is unknown, but eventually, I received a call. Was that call from Bethany? She said some really odd things. "Kaylin, are you all right? Are things not going well with Bethany?" After explaining the situation to Terza, who became incensed on my behalf. "Come back home immediately," she insisted. Neely, upon hearing the details later, assured, "Once we find a new place, I'll come to get you," prompting me to leave. I began packing in earnest, and the following day, I departed from the in-laws. Neither Bethany nor anyone else came to see me off or attempted to persuade me to stay. While commuting between my parents' home, the in-laws, and work, I planned to pack up my belongings at the in-laws. A few weeks later, with an afternoon shift ahead, I spent the morning cleaning at my parents' house. Then, the phone rang. Terza, upon checking. "It's Bethany," and she answered with a puzzled face. As Terza took the call, her expression turned odd, and she signaled me. It seemed Bethany was saying something bizarre over the phone. Switching to speaker, a familiar boisterous voice came through, sounding too cheerful. "Life's going to be tough ahead. Who would have thought she'd end up like this?" Who exactly is having a tough time? What do you mean? That's what I'm saying, son's wife. It's karma, I guess. Your foolish daughter caused a major accident because her brakes failed. We exchanged looks. An accident? I hadn't stepped out of my parents' house this morning. Bethany, even happier, kept talking, causing a major accident before even getting to work. It's all because she didn't quit. It's just absurd. The situation was too confusing with too many unanswered questions. Interrupting Bethany, I spoke into the speaker. Son's wife, you mean me? I'm fine, though. What accident are you talking about? What? Really? What do you mean? Bethany was clearly flustered. It was a poorly executed prank call, yet the content was baffling, demanding an explanation. Why are you all right? If not you, then whose accident is it? Bethany only grew more panicked. Amidst our back and forth, an agitated Neely appeared at my parents' house. Grabbing my shoulder as he rushed in, he seemed relieved to see I was unharmed. Kaylin, I'm glad you're safe. What's going on? Between Bethany and you, Neely, what happened? Suddenly, Cheryl had an accident. Neely revealed. Cheryl did? It's a relief you weren't involved, Kaylin. We're heading to the hospital now. Will you come with us? Agreeing to Neely's request, I took the afternoon off and we hurried to the hospital. Upon arrival, we learned Cheryl was still undergoing treatment but was in no life-threatening condition and remained conscious. Bethany, who was also there and had been upset, along with Neely, first breathed a sigh of relief at the news. Then, we went back and forth between the hospital and the in-laws, gathering necessities for Cheryl's hospital stay until her treatment concluded. Cheryl, carried into the hospital room, looked exhausted but was lying in bed, capable of conversation. Neely approached her side to hear her story. I got into the car to go to work this morning. But then, the brakes stopped working on the way, and I crashed into a utility pole. I heard no one else was involved, but Yeah, it was a street with no pedestrians, so no one else was involved. But Cheryl's back. We had already heard about the after-effects of the injuries from the self-inflicted accident. Cheryl was saved by prompt rescue but had severely injured her back. As a result, she's currently paralyzed from the waist down. She can't move her legs or walk, and living independently is out of the question. And it's almost certain that the paralysis will remain as a permanent after-effect. Upon hearing the doctor's explanation, Cheryl declared, I can't believe this is happening. I'll sue the maintenance company. Attempting to lash out in tears, but Neely easily restrained her since she could only move her upper body. Indeed, the brake failure seemed like a maintenance fault. I noticed Bethany in the corner of the room turning pale. Bethany, are you okay? Despite being treated poorly, I couldn't harbor resentment in such a situation. Concerned by her pallid complexion, Bethany remained silent when I addressed her. Then, do you have any idea about this? Neely asked. His voice was so cold and stern that I was startled and looked at him. I'm asking if you know anything about Cheryl's car accident. Bethany, trembling and pale. No. She shook her head. Despite Neely's repeated inquiries, her responses remained the same. No, I don't know. Denying it, but an uneasy feeling grew inside me. Neely excused himself to Cheryl and began operating her smartphone. All family vehicles were equipped with dash cams, which could be checked for several weeks of footage through a dedicated app. When Neely retrieved Cheryl's car data and pressed play, we were about to witness a shocking scene. This is Bethany, right? Lights turned on in the garage's frame, revealing Bethany. She peered into the car from beyond the hood. She seemed to be carrying something, repeatedly approaching the front of Cheryl's car and squatting down. Since the dashcam recorded both video and audio, sounds of something being dragged and her muttering were audible. It's so heavy, how difficult. Is it this way? Yes, this line should be correct. From the occasional words, it was clear she was searching for something under the car. Then a loud snap was heard. She was cutting something underneath the vehicle. Cheryl and I immediately understood what she was doing, feeling the blood drain from our faces. Confronted with the footage, Bethany began to tremble violently. From Bethany's voice in the video, a chilling sentence was heard. "This will send that daughter-in-law straight to hell." The call to my parents' house now made sense. Bethany had intended for me to be the victim of an accident. But instead, it was Cheryl who had the accident. It was clear she mistook my car for Cheryl's, but her tampering was now undeniable. "I can't believe it. What were you planning to do if I had died?" Furious with the truth, Cheryl confronted her. "I couldn't tell the cars apart," Bethany blurted out in panic. The mix-up had a somewhat unavoidable reason. By chance, Cheryl and I had cars of the same make and color. A common black, domestic compact car. We were both surprised when Cheryl moved back in, as we discovered our cars were identical. My parents' house lacked parking space, so my car was left at the in-laws. Since I planned to move out completely, I left it there except for when needed for work. It was unlikely for us to confuse our cars. We each had designated parking spots in the garage. However, Cheryl often took liberties, choosing whichever spot was more convenient for her at the moment. Despite repeated warnings, the issue never resolved, making it understandable that Bethany couldn't distinguish between them. I had used my car the day before, but upon returning, found Cheryl's car in my spot. Uninterested in conversing, I parked in her spot and went straight to my parents'. Bethany, unaware of these circumstances and not knowledgeable about cars, unwittingly tampered with it. Cheryl sobbed bitterly. "It's Mom's fault for not checking properly," she lashed out at Bethany. Bethany, possibly panicked, began to irrationally lash out. "Why didn't you park in the right place? It's your fault for not parking properly. What are you going to do now with your body like that?" "What do you mean, what am I going to do? It's my fault. It's because of Mom. It's not an accident, it's an incident you caused." Their accusations filled the hospital, creating chaos. Neely took me out of the room once for intentionally tampering with the car. He called the police, citing that as the reason. Due to the recent accident, the police arrived promptly to address the situation. After submitting the dashcam footage and the recordings from the moment we entered the hospital room, Bethany was taken away on the spot. Amidst the commotion and turning pale, Bethany was led away, and Cheryl, with tear-swollen eyes, slowly turned to me and Neely, asking, "Hey, we're not strangers, we're family. Even if Mom isn't here, you'll take care of me, right?" She subtly inquired about future care and support. "No," Neely immediately responded with a firm. As an engineer who has worked with cars, Neely glared at Cheryl, clearly dissatisfied. "The accident's cause partly lies with you. If the brake hose was cut, a warning light should have come on. Plus, if the brake fluid was drained, you'd notice the pedal feeling odd right away. You should have stopped driving the moment you felt something was wrong, instead of forcing it and ending up severely injured. From my point of view, you're the one at fault here," Neely said, cutting her off sharply, and then began to play a video on his smartphone. "Take a look," he said. The video from Cheryl's dashcam showed a different time than before. This morning, before the accident, as she was about to leave for work. Of course, Cheryl was in the frame, clearly struggling to load a heavy object into her car. The object looked like a small safe, which I recognized and exclaimed, "Isn't that your watch safe?" Surprised, I voiced out, and Neely nodded with a stern expression. For some reason, Cheryl was attempting to transport Neely's valuable watch safe, which he had kept secure. Appearing suspicious and rushed, she loaded the safe into the car without checking her surroundings or even buckling her seatbelt, then tried to drive out of the garage. This entire sequence played out before us, with her face turning as pale as Bethany's had earlier. Neely, not allowing any escape, pressed her. "Will you talk?" Cheryl began to confess something unbelievable. Initially, she left for work in the car. Cheryl had explained, but she actually planned to take the safe and the watch to sell everything. She didn't have the key to the safe, but thought she could break it upon arrival. Right after moving the car, she noticed the brakes felt odd but panicked to get away from the in-laws' house before anyone found out, leading to her pressing the accelerator and causing the accident. Cheryl tried to explain through tears, but Neely looked down on her with disdain. "I needed the money right away to pay back to my husband. I just thought of borrowing a little bit," she said. Cheryl returned home after her divorce, but she was lying even then. "I came back because my husband cheated on me." But it was actually the other way around. It was Cheryl who had an affair. She returned to her parents' house because she ran out of savings due to being sued for alimony and couldn't afford to live alone. She disliked sharing the embarrassing story of owing alimony, so she made her ex-husband out to be the villain to protect herself. Since moving back, she hadn't worked, making it impossible to see an end to her unpaid alimony. Cheryl resorted to secretly selling valuable items from the house to get by, but there's a limit to everything. Eventually, she set her sights on Neely's expensive watch, leading to the accident. "Thinking about the alimony stressed me out. But I felt better while bossing Kaylin around with Mom. That's why I did those horrible things. I'll change, please don't abandon me." Starting to despair about her future, she pleaded in a cloying tone, but seeing the cold looks from me and Neely, she seemed to realize she was at a disadvantage. Suddenly changing her tone. "Don't run away, and support yourself. Take care of me," she yelled. Given her past behavior, such demands were out of the question. "I still have alimony left. I was the one who ended up in an accident instead of you. Ungrateful, ruining someone's life. You too should pay for it." Me and Neely listened silently as Cheryl, perhaps exhausted from the day, began to rant incoherently. Her commotion brought several nurses running, prompting Neely and me to leave the room. Then, "Let's never come back here again," we agreed. Later, the police asked if Neely had any friends or acquaintances knowledgeable about cars. As Bethany's actions constituted a crime and arrest was inevitable. However, it remained unclear how Bethany, who didn't drive or know much about cars, came up with the idea to cut the brake hose or how she obtained the tools to do so. Neither Neely nor I could think of anyone who fit the description. A few days later, the investigation revealed the truth. Bethany had been infatuated with a young man named Billy, whom she met before our marriage, paying him large sums of money. He was a con artist targeting older women, pretending to date them to swindle money. Bethany, having depleted her inheritance and living expenses on dates with him, proposed living with us when her finances tightened. Unsatisfied, she tried to collect money under the guise of rent and gratuity, but we refused, citing repeated breaches of agreement. Desperate, Bethany consulted the man, who suggested a dreadful idea. If the son's wife dies, the son, being the husband, would receive insurance money. With that, you could live luxuriously every day. Bethany, already under the man's influence, eagerly purchased the specified tools and proceeded with the plan. However, the car tampered with was Cheryl's, leading to the tragedy. The young man's identity was also uncovered. Interrogated. I did talk, but it was all jokes. I didn't tell her what to buy. I said nothing. He denied everything. He admitted to repeating date-like encounters with Bethany, not for romance, but for her financial generosity. I wasn't serious, so I wouldn't incite a crime, he argued. However, police investigation found evidence that the plan to steal my insurance money from Neely was seriously concocted. Further crimes, including blackmail against other women, were revealed. Thus, the man was also arrested alongside Bethany. After the trial, Bethany received a prison sentence. Cheryl, hoping for care, contacted her ex-husband, only to be rebuffed and urged to pay the settlement from their divorce court promptly. She started using a welfare services helper, but was so rough and demanding that private services increasingly refused her. Eventually, no one was willing to cater to her whims, leaving her with a stern, unyielding helper. Cheryl complained, "She's too formal and cold. I want someone kind, with warmth." However, no one willing to tolerate Cheryl's unreasonable demands emerged, and the stern helper remained her caregiver. My environment also changed. Because this incident greatly worried my parents, I requested a transfer to a different store closer to my home. This request was granted, and I happily began working near my parents' house. Neely felt uncomfortable staying in the town with the in-laws, so he decided to change jobs and move closer to my parents' home. It's a fresh start in a new place, but he always takes care of me. I caused trouble. The watch Neely had stolen by Cheryl was returned to us by the police after the investigation, though the safe was damaged by the accident's impact. Some of the watches inside were broken, but Neely decided to make these a memento of the entire family, determined to cut ties with the in-laws. We both have gotten used to the new environment. Now, we are choosing a hospital to start infertility treatments, which was our original goal.